The second day of my newfound widowhood, Pei, the treacherous minister notorious for his penchant for marrying widows, came rushing to pay his respects. Leaning against my husband's coffin, he was overcome with grief. Poor sister-in-law, barely married and already widowed. This official truly finds it unbearable to see you suffer. It's quite serendipitous, really. Just 3 days ago, I bid farewell to my 7th consecutive wife at her funeral. The house happens to be empty now. I wonder if Madam would be willing to move in. It'd certainly liven things up. I narrowed my eyes as I sized up the man before me. He'd buried 7 wives in succession, and this was my 3rd time being widowed. Damn, we're birds of a feather. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. Madam, Minister Pei has arrived. On the night of my 3rd wedding, my new husband Minister Zhong died suddenly from excitement. The servants in the mansion wept uncontrollably, but I alone remained composed amidst the crisis, calmly arranging his funeral affairs. Throughout the entire morning, I received condolences and saw off guests, just as the crowd had finally begun to disperse and I was preparing to rest for a while. A servant came to announce the visitor. I yawned and rubbed my swollen, tear-streaked eyes. What position does this Lord Pei hold? The Chief Grand Secretary of the court. Such a high-ranking official. I quickly took out an onion to fumigate my eyes, and tears began streaming down uncontrollably. The servant glanced around and lowered his voice. It's just that this man isn't quite proper. Madam must be extremely careful. Improper, very improper. No matter how improper he is, could a Grand Secretary of the realm possibly flirt with a widow right before her deceased husband's memorial tablet? Have you no shame? Moments later, Lord Pei, clad in crimson chelene robes, entered the manor surrounded by a retinue of guards. The man had a high-bridged nose and sharply defined lips, with thick, sweeping eyebrows and skin so pale it resembled freshly fired porcelain. His striking beauty alone would suffice. Yet it was that aura of untamed arrogance about him that truly overwhelmed. The wind whipped his robes wildly as his eyes blazed with unrivaled arrogance. Too bad he wasn't the brightest who wears red robes to a funeral. And then, my virtuous brother. How could you depart so suddenly, my poor little sister-in-law, widowed the moment she stepped through the door? How can this official bear such cruelty? The elegant and graceful Minister Pei burst into tears on command, weeping so movingly it could stir heaven and earth. Behind him, dozens of guards uniformly wiped their tears in unison. This spectacle startled me so much I momentarily forgot to cry. I never expected my husband to be so well liked. I thought everyone was hoping for his death. As I stared blankly, a pair of jade-like hands with distinct knuckles suddenly picked up an onion from under the table and casually wafted it toward my eyes. In an instant, tears gushed forth uncontrollably. Then I heard the man say sorrowfully, "The bitterness in sister-in-law's heart is something those who haven't experienced it could never understand. But I'm different, to be frank with you, sister-in-law. Just 3 days ago, I buried my 7th consecutive wife. Now my home stands empty. And my heart is heavy with grief. Every time I return, I'm overwhelmed with longing, unable to find peace even at night. I imagine you must feel the same." I nodded blankly, thinking this man was truly handsome. Far more so than my 3 late husbands. Indeed, in that case, Lord Pei steadied the coffin, his peach blossom eyes gazing at me with tender affection. Might my sister-in-law consider moving to this official's residence? That way, we 2 pitiful souls could keep each other company and liven things up a bit. What? Bewildered, I turned to look at the servant who had earlier called him improper. Is this something that can be said in such a setting? You only said he was improper. But you didn't say he was this improper. I've been pestered by Pei Yuanzhen. Despite the freezing cold, he dresses flamboyantly and visits the Zhong residence every few days, a jade fan in hand, fanning so hard it's making me sneeze repeatedly. Look at you, look at you. This is what happens without a man around, such cold weather, and you're not taking proper care of yourself. Has sister-in-law fallen ill? I wiped my nose and answered perfunctorily, just a minor ailment. Pei Yuanzhen looked genuinely distressed, pulling a handkerchief from his sleeve to hand me, his tone dripping with tenderness. A widow like you should take better care of herself. If you don't feel sorry for yourself, I certainly do. After saying this, he glanced around the house and sighed. Your honorable brother must have made quite a fortune these years. This house is splendidly decorated, even more luxurious than mine." Then he turned to the expressionless guard beside him and asked, "Archie, what did the brokerage say? How much silver can this house fetch?" "Reporting to your highness, Minister Zhong's residence is located in the bustling heart of the capital, originally a 5-courtyard compound with 45 rooms. Minister Zhong found it insufficiently grand. 3 years ago, he purchased the neighboring property belonging to Lord Liu, combining both estates. It now spans 7 courtyards with 6 to 7 rooms in total. The brokerage manager conservatively estimates it could fetch at least 2,000 taels." 2,000 taels, that much. Upon hearing this, Pei Yuanzhen's expression grew even gentler, his fan lightly brushing against the back of my hand. "I had previously heard from your esteemed brother that sister-in-law was in poor health, bedridden for over a month before the wedding, worrying him so much he couldn't focus during court sessions. While your brother was alive, he could have taken good care of sister-in-law, but who would have thought? How could he just die in bed like that?" Pei Yuanzhen wiped his tears again. "And sister-in-law too, why didn't she advise him better, a man over 70 years old? How could he personally attend his own wedding night?" I also wiped away tears and said pitifully, "Exactly what I said. I kept telling him not to come, but he wouldn't listen. In the end, after all that effort, before he could even take off his pants, he just collapsed." The room was filled with an eerie suffocation. A dozen guards simultaneously lowered their heads, their ears turning red. Only Pei Yuanzhen remained composed, gently patting my hand. "My apologies, sister-in-law. Since this official once served alongside your virtuous husband in court, his wife shall be treated as my own. In that case, pack your things these next few days, and I'll return to make preparations as well. Let's aim for me to come propose within 7 days, and we'll sell the house by month's end. After that, we'll live well together, and not let down your worthy brother's matchmaking efforts." Having said this, Pei Yuanzhen happily circled the room with his hands clasped behind his back, even pointing things out unprompted to his expressionless guard. This vase was bestowed upon Minister Zhong by the late emperor during his reign. At the time, everyone opposed His Majesty's visits to courtesans. Only Minister Zhong stood firm against public opinion, saying His Majesty has toiled diligently and achieved much, why shouldn't he enjoy some pleasure? The moved emperor rewarded him with many fine treasures. The stone-faced guard nodded. Minister Zhong was a considerate and virtuous official. Pei Yuanzhen circled back to the front of the screen, his face alight with delight. "Ho! Even Minister Zhong possesses such a cloisonné screen. When I saw it earlier in the Empress Dowager's palace, I was utterly envious. Now it's perfect. Tomorrow I'll have it moved to my study. Just looking at it will ease my mind while working." The expressionless attendant stated matter-of-factly, "Fine treasures deserve worthy masters." I watched the master and servant duo who were acting as if they were strolling through their own home, and cleared my throat loudly. Pei Yuanzhen quickly turned his head to look at me upon hearing the sound. "Sister-in-law, your health is too frail. You really can't stay in this place any longer," he anxiously instructed the poker-faced servant. "Quick, hurry and help sister-in-law pack her things. The physician who attended to the 7 previous mistresses still lives at our residence. He'll finally be of use now." The poker-faced servant stepped before me, looking down from his height. "Madam, stop looking around. Go pack your belongings quickly. Our master is extremely busy. He's only made time to come today. We'll all return to the manor together," saving him the trouble of traveling back and forth. I opened my mouth wide in disbelief. How could someone be so shameless? "I'm not leaving. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere." The poker-faced man turned to tattle. "Master, she refuses to go." Pei Yuanzhen was hugging a vase reluctantly, stealing a glance at me amidst his busyness. "Really not coming, sister-in-law?" I nodded. "My late husband has only been gone for a few days. I must observe mourning rites at home." Pei Yuanzhen sighed and didn't press further, leaving behind the words, "I only hope sister-in-law won't regret this." He set down the vase and left noisily with his guards. "Madam, something terrible has happened. It had only been half a month of peace." Lai Wang, the servant who previously told me about Pei Yuanzhen's improper behavior, rushed back to the mansion in a panic. The court suddenly ordered an investigation into the master's family assets, accusing him of corruption and bribery. They might confiscate our property. I was lying in bed, contemplating how to quickly sell off my assets and return to the village to build a house. Such a large fortune would be enough to ensure a worry-free life for the rest of my days. And I could even take in a live-in son-in-law. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect such a bolt from the blue. With a sudden carp's leap, I sat bolt upright and widened my eyes to question Lai Wang. "What's going on?" Lai Wang quickly closed the door and said angrily, "It's none other than that Chief Minister Pei. The damned bastard has his eyes on our family fortune and is dead set on marrying you as his second wife. Seeing you refuse, he's deliberately setting a trap to force you into submission." I clenched my fists, already seething with anger. This family fortune was earned by our aunt through her own genuine abilities. Why should it be given to him? I had originally planned to take this silver and return to the village for a peaceful life, but who would have thought Pei Yuanjun would suddenly appear halfway? Does he really think he can just take this family fortune whenever he wants? I snorted coldly. Since he insists on delivering the family fortune to my doorstep, it would be impolite not to accept it. Let's have a proper meeting with this Chief Minister Pei. Farewell, Pei Yuanjun. It was in the dungeons of the Ministry of Justice. "Madam, don't hold back now. Confess whatever you know quickly. A widow like you won't withstand torture." Pei Yuanjun sat slouched casually, not even looking at me. Though his poker-faced guard was the one who spoke, I frowned and began to cry. "My lord, it's not that I refuse to confess. I truly don't know anything. My husband passed away the very day I married into this family. How could I possibly know what he'd done?" Pei Yuanjun clicked his tongue twice. "How pitiful. Your tears are breaking this official's heart." The poker-faced attendant promptly produced a handkerchief, flicked it open with force, and wiped Pei Yuanjun's eyes. The master's heart is truly kind. After drying her tears, Pei Yuanjun gazed at me tenderly and said leisurely, "I shan't hide this from you, madam. Someone at court has impeached Minister Zhong, accusing him of years of bribe-taking and granting unlawful favors to prisoners. The Minister of Personnel holds a rank of first-grade secondary, with an annual salary of 180 taels. Grand Secretary Zhong has only held this position for 8 years, so having 1,000 taels of silver in his household would already be the limit. Yet according to my knowledge, his residence is worth no less than 2,000 taels. And the extravagant items in his home are beyond count. Even the lady's canopy bed alone costs over 100 taels." Pei Yuanjun spoke unhurriedly, leisurely spinning the jade bead bracelet around his finger as he squinted at me. "Though madam may not know what Grand Secretary Zhong has done, you surely understand better than I how much silver lies in his treasury. If we wait for the Ministry of Justice to raid your home, not a single item will remain. Not only that, but if Lord Zhong's corruption is proven true, according to our dynasty's laws, embezzlement of 1,000 taels warrants extermination of 3 generations of kin. Though Lord Zhong is dead, his wife still lives." Having said this, Pei Yuanjun gazed at me with an inscrutable look. That gaze resembled a wolf eyeing its captured prey. I put on a pitiful expression. "For the sake of this helpless woman, may your excellency show me a way out." Pei Yuanjun found a comfortable spot and lazily reclined. Giving a slight wave of his hand, the poker-faced man walked up to me. Looking down at me once more from his superior position, "Bring your family fortune to our mansion, and our master will spare your life. I demand a proper marriage proposal." Pei Yuanjun glanced at me leisurely and said, "Granted, these family assets shall be counted as my dowry, to be managed at my discretion." A trace of derisive laughter flashed through the poker-faced man's eyes, only to hear Pei Yuanjun speak again. "Approved. I want to live alone in my own courtyard, and I'll use my own servants." "Fine." Looking at Pei Yuanjun's indifferent expression, I smiled. "I'll marry you." The expressionless guard retreated contentedly, standing beside Pei Yuanjun like a statue. Pei Yuanjun patted his robe and strolled to the torture rack, his voice laced with amusement. "Speaking of which, by marrying this official, sister-in-law has preserved both her life and her family fortune, but these are all benefits for her. Surely this official shouldn't have worked for nothing, should he?" Minister Zhong's family fortune was indeed substantial, setting aside properties and possessions. Just the banknotes and gold alone amounted to several 100,000 taels. These past few days, Lai Wang intermittently exchanged gold for banknotes at the pawnshop, but the household items proved difficult to handle. Firstly, there were too many items. and they were too bulky to be discreetly removed. Second, those items were truly too precious. Some were bestowed by the late emperor, others were priceless treasures that even the imperial palace might not possess. If these things were given away, forget about exchanging them for silver. I'd be lucky to keep my head on my shoulders. So, rolling my eyes craftily, I put on a pitiful expression and said, "My lord, didn't you fancy my husband's estate? Then let me offer it to you, just one house." Pei Yuanjun narrowed his eyes. I gritted my teeth, feigning reluctance, including all the antique pieces inside the house. Pei Yuanjun smiled. He laughed with particular delight, quickly stepping before me to gently help me rise. Truly worthy of being this official's new wife, so considerate of others, perfectly suited to my heart's desire. Shadow 7, why haven't you escorted my wife back to the manor yet? This vulgar place is no fitting residence for the wife of an official. The poker-faced, "No," Shadow 7, was moved. What fortune madam has. This is the first time our master has ever doted on a woman like this. Me, only after entering the Prime Minister's residence did I understand why Pei Yuanjun, a Prime Minister himself, had gazed upon the minister's mansion with such yearning. It's too shabby, it's absolutely wretched. Even if I were to build a house myself in the countryside, I wouldn't make it this dilapidated. Shadow 7 led me to a courtyard and said expressionlessly, "This is the finest residence in our estate. Even our master couldn't bear to live here himself. The master treats you so well." In the courtyard, the weeds stood only waist-high, fallen leaves covered the ground, and the broken door of the main house creaked loudly whenever the wind blew. It couldn't help but remind me of my second late husband. "Dare I ask, Lord Pei?" Before I could finish my question, Yingqi eagerly turned away. "There are no extra servants in the mansion, so madam should use the attendants she brought with her. The master has been busy these days. If there's anything, it can wait a few months." With that, he vanished like a gust of wind. For the next half-month, my courtyard seemed completely cut off from the world. Pei Yuanjun, who used to visit the minister's residence every few days, so often that avoiding him was impossible. But now that I've truly stepped into his domain, the man seems to have vanished into thin air. Lai Wang took several maids to tidy up the courtyard and spent the entire afternoon making inquiries, only returning after nightfall. The servants in the front courtyard keep their mouths shut tight. They avoid me the moment they see me, unwilling to say even a word. I spent half the day pestering the kitchen maids in the rear courtyard before managing to glean some fragmentary information. According to the cook, Pei Yuanjun had an extraordinary fondness for widows, but ordinary widows didn't catch his eye. He preferred those who were young, beautiful, and whose late husbands had been high-ranking officials. So far, I'm his 8th consecutive wife. All 7 of my predecessors were married to officials of the 3rd rank or higher. Their husbands met various unfortunate ends. Some died suddenly, some dropped dead unexpectedly, some encountered bandits while traveling. The most pitiful one drunkenly fell into a latrine and drowned. Without exception, they all left behind vast fortunes. In short, no matter how a man died, as long as he was dead, Pei Yuanjun would rush to the funeral with a few taels of silver, then joyfully marry the widow. What kind of sickness is this? Lai Wang, what's even more terrifying is that these widows usually don't survive more than 2 months after entering his household, since his first wife came through the door. Pei Yuanjun brought in a barefoot doctor from the countryside. That doctor has been living there ever since. He's seen off 7 wives already, and is still there. Lai Wang narrowed his eyes slightly. "Madam, no matter what, this Prime Minister's residence isn't safe, especially those medicines delivered by that physician. You mustn't touch them." Several days later, Pei Yuanjun arrived, and he brought along that barefoot physician who'd sent 7 previous wives to their graves. The moment he entered the courtyard, Pei Yuanjun circled it once, nodding repeatedly. "Indeed, a household simply can't do without women. Look how lively this courtyard has become." Lai Wang rolled his eyes. How could it not be lively? Just decorating with flowers and plants alone cost no less than 20 taels. What's even more infuriating is that the cook told Lai Wang every newly arrived lady would require her own courtyard. The courtyards were invariably dilapidated and run down. So if the ladies wanted to live there, they had to pay out of their own pockets to fix them up. Never mind how long they stayed. Whenever they left, the courtyards were always impeccably restored. Once inside, Pei Yuanjin happily sat down across from me and tapped my hand with her fan. I remember sister-in-law hasn't been well. I've been so busy these past few days that I haven't had time to check on you. But today, the moment I had some free time, I hurriedly brought a physician with me. After speaking, he directed the physician, "Quick, take my sister-in-law's pulse and see how her constitution is." The barefoot doctor had long, unkempt hair that draped over his shoulders. He placed his fingers on my wrist. After just 2 or 3 breaths, he shook his head and said with deep regret, "Madam is so young, yet her health has deteriorated to this extent. Does she often feel weak? Does she easily get dizzy when standing up? Does she suffer unbearable pain during her monthly cycle? Does she pant after just a few steps?" I shook my head. "Not at all. I'm as strong as an ox, could knock his head off with one punch." The barefoot doctor wouldn't give up, insisting I squat on the ground. Up. I didn't understand why but slowly got up, which displeased him. "No hesitation, be quick." I sprang up abruptly. Feeling dizzy, the barefoot doctor looked satisfied and smugly glanced at Pei Yuanjin. "I told you she'd faint, but she just had to argue with me." Pei Yuanjin shot him a glance, then continued squinting at the large chest in the inner room without saying a word. "Madam's condition won't improve without medicine. Since I've got nothing better to do, starting tomorrow I'll personally prepare her medicine, and I'm not boasting if she takes my remedies. She'll be completely cured within half a month." I glanced at Lai Wang, who quickly stepped forward. "We couldn't possibly trouble the physician with such chores. Why don't you write down the prescription? This servant will fetch the herbs accordingly. We've got cooking pots right here in our courtyard." "Hey, that won't do." The barefoot doctor shook his head disapprovingly. "As a healer, how can one find patients troublesome? Besides, brewing medicine requires precise control of heat and timing. Do you really think you can do it better than me?" He spoke so convincingly that I might have believed him, if not for the calluses on his fingers rubbing painfully against my hand. Lai Wang retreated, and the doctor walked over to Pei Yuanjin, whispering softly, "Come on, it's time to go back for dinner." Pei Yuanjin glanced at him, then stood up and dusted himself off. "If there's a way to treat it. Sister-in-law should focus on getting well without worrying about the cost. All expenses will be covered by the Chancellor's residence." Yet he's reluctant to spend money cleaning his own estate, but is perfectly willing to spend on medicine. When Pei Yuanjin reached the courtyard gate, I heard him lower his voice and say to Shadow 7, "Go find out which family this widow is from. Ask her parents for the dowry. If it's less than 500 taels, I'll personally go collect it." The master is truly kind-hearted, asking for only 500 taels. They're getting off easy. Pei Yuanjin nodded and sighed. This official is just too kind. Pei Yuanjin was a decisive man. In just 3 days, he uncovered most of my past and came bustling into my courtyard. "Is it true you've widowed 3 husbands in 1 year?" "That did happen." Pei Yuanjin exploded upon hearing this, pacing around the table with his hands clasped behind his back, looking as if he'd suffered a tremendous loss. "Do you know what this is called?" "What? Marriage fraud." "This is marriage fraud. After all my distinguished reputation, high-ranking position, and this face, truly 1 in 10,000. There are so many women wanting to marry me that they could form a line from the city gate to the palace. Why would I, an official, pass up all those noble ladies and choose you?" I looked up. "Isn't it because you're after my family fortune?" Pei Yuanjin raised his palm, signaling me to shut up. "No, it's because I'm kind-hearted. I noticed you're a widow with immense wealth, and fearing you might fall victim to foul play, I chose to pass over all those fresh young maidens to marry you instead. But I never imagined you'd be so dishonest. Such a grave matter as being a husband killer. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Had I known, I'd have simply confiscated your property. Why would I have gone through the trouble of bringing you home, with your lethal fortune? What if you end up killing me too? This is somewhat unfair. It's not like I'm forcing you to marry me. Wasn't it you who insisted on marrying me? Besides, you still haven't married me yet." But clearly, Pei Yuanjin wasn't a reasonable man, nor was Shadow 7 by his side. Our master is such a good man, smooth sailing all his life, never suffered such humiliation. This matter can't be left like this. Right, he must pay compensation, at least 100 taels of silver. Pei Yuanjin kicked Shadow 7 squarely in the rear. "A measly 100 taels to brush me off, at least 500. Shadow 7 rubbed his backside and nodded vigorously. Exactly, or this matter won't end peacefully. The master-servant pair kept bickering back and forth until my temples started throbbing. No money. Pei Yuanjun couldn't help but laugh angrily upon hearing this. And what about the inheritance that old bastard left you? I picked up the teacup, took a sip, and replied calmly, Your Excellency promised earlier that those silver taels were meant to be my dowry. According to the laws of our dynasty, men are not permitted to seize a woman's dowry without just cause, my lord. If you insist on taking it by force, I fear it won't sound well when word gets out. Would this official fear such things? I smiled faintly. Of course my lord wouldn't fear it. After all, this isn't the first time you've done such things, and rumors have long ceased to trouble you. However, this time the situation is slightly different. Pei Yuanjun narrowed his eyes, signaling for me to continue. As far as I know, the previous wives entered your household voluntarily, without requiring your excellency to resort to force, but this time, your excellency threatened me with my late husband's bribery case to compel my submission. Once a bribery case is filed with the Ministry of Justice, even if your excellency has closed it, the records remain. I heard that your excellency has already sold the mansion of the Ministry of Revenue, exchanging it for several thousand taels of silver notes. If we can coexist peacefully, then let it be. But if your excellency insists on forcing the issue, then this humble woman will have no choice but to beat the drum of injustice at the Ministry of Justice. Embezzlement of 1,000 taels warrants extermination of 3 generations with your excellency's 2,000 taels. I wonder if 3 generations would be enough to pay. Pei Yuanjun found this amusing and gestured at Shadow 7. She's threatening me. In all my years, this is the first time I've been threatened, and you're just standing there. What use are you? Shadow 7 instantly drew his blade and swung it straight at me. Bang! The sword snapped, breaking cleanly in half as it clattered to the ground. Pei Yuanjun and Shadow 7 stared wide-eyed, utterly disbelieving what they had just witnessed. How did it break? Shadow 7 paused. If I'm not mistaken, it seems she broke it barehanded. Pei Yuanjun. My act of snapping the blade barehanded profoundly shocked Pei Yuanjun. He was so excited he danced about, asking me where I'd learned martial arts. I wield great power in court, but if there's one regret, it's never having learned martial arts. May I ask, sister-in-law, how did a delicate widow like yourself master such formidable skills? Was that even a question? I was forced into it. Otherwise, who'd willingly give up a comfortable life to suffer hardships for no reason? Who forced you? How did they do it? Could you invite them to force me too? Pei Yuanjun rested his chin in his hand, gazing at me with admiration in his eyes. He's dead. Oh, what a pity. How did he die? He was my first husband. On our wedding night, someone came seeking revenge and hacked him to death. What kind of heartless bastard would do such a thing? Couldn't they have talked it out? How could they just start hacking away at someone? There's no law and order anymore. I paused, afraid that Pei Yuanjun might steer the conversation further astray. She redirected it back to the matter of silver. Lord Pei, as a widow with little skill, I can only rely on my late husband's inheritance to survive in my later years. Naturally, that silver cannot be touched. But if my lord seeks compensation, there might still be a way. How so? I do still have a father. It's only right for you to demand compensation after marrying his ill-fated daughter who brings misfortune to husbands. Don't say 500 taels, he ought to give you 1,000. Pei Yuanjun listened with tears welling up in his eyes and tightly grasped my hand. Sister-in-law, you truly understand me. Quickly tell me, who is my father-in-law? I'll go pay him a visit right away. Oh, he's the assistant director of the Ministry of Works. He Kang. If others heard about the Ministry of Works vice director, their first reaction would likely be suspicion. The man only has 2 daughters, both still unmarried. Where did this widowed daughter suddenly come from? But that's how others would react. Pei Yuanjun was different. The moment he heard, he grabbed me and insisted on going back to my family home, adamant about personally paying respects to his father-in-law. To be honest, this was my first time stepping through the gates of the He residence. The He mansion was quite imposing, not much inferior to the minister's residence. But all this was thanks to Lady He, for her father was the salt control censor of Jianghuai. He Kang's rise from an obscure local official to his current position was entirely due to his father-in-law's influence. That doesn't add up. If Lady Ruhair is the first wife, why are you several years older than her two daughters? Pei Yuanjun stroked his chin and voiced his doubt. It's rather laughable when you think about it. To outsiders, He Kang appeared deeply devoted to Lady He, treating her with profound affection and loyalty. But in truth, within this marriage, Madam He occupied an overwhelmingly dominant position due to her superior family background, making her naturally imperious. She forbade He Kang from taking concubines and imposed numerous demands on him. Initially compliant, He Kang gradually grew rebellious, compounded by Madam His plain appearance. He secretly married my mother in the countryside during their second year of marriage. My mother was delicate and tender, worshipping He Kang as if he were heaven itself. She didn't even know what her husband actually did for a living, simply believing him to be an ordinary traveling peddler. Under the pretense of business, He Kang spent only 2 months each year with my mother, devoting the rest of his time to his first wife in the capital, yet he managed to keep both women completely devoted and utterly unsuspecting. Later, my mother gave birth to me. Since Madam He remained childless for so long while my mother bore a child first, He Kang grew even more affectionate toward her. Whatever fine things he came across, he would heap them all before my mother, making her increasingly devoted to him. Until I was 6 years old, my mother contracted typhoid fever, suffered several high fevers, and her health began to gradually decline. He Kang didn't disdain her either, bringing good medicine every now and then, genuinely wanting to cure her. But my mother's body failed her, and after struggling for 2 years, she couldn't hold on any longer. When she passed, He Kang wept uncontrollably. He bought premium rosewood to make her coffin and found an auspicious burial site to lay her to rest. I was only 8 that year. Having lost my mother, I naturally wanted to follow my father. He Kang took me to Jiangnan and settled me in a mansion. He told me to stay there peacefully, that someone would take good care of me. Since he traveled constantly without a stable place, bringing me along would be inconvenient. Once things settled down in the future, he would come fetch me. I harbored no doubts and settled in contentedly. The woman assigned to look after me was stern-faced and exceptionally strict, never cracking a smile. She taught me music, chess, calligraphy, painting, how to shape my brows and apply makeup, as well as close combat and poisoning. I naively asked her what these skills were for. The old woman replied, "To survive, first you must be someone useful." I stayed in that mansion for 5 years. For 5 years, I was often covered in wounds, frequently beaten so badly I couldn't leave my bed. Yet through this, I mastered exceptional martial skills. Might I inquire as to the purpose of your Excellency's visit? After years apart, He Kang remained as upright in posture and dignified in appearance as ever. A slightly plump woman accompanied him, dressed splendidly yet with a kindly smile. Pei Yuanjun carried an air of casual languor wherever he went. Upon entering the room, he went straight to the seat of honor and ordered the servants to bring him Mingqian tea. He Kang's expression darkened slightly. "Prime Minister, what is the meaning of this?" Pei Yuanjun surveyed his surroundings as a matter of routine, then smiled contentedly with great amiability. "I've never visited the residence before. Who would have thought my father-in-law lives in such affluence? Truly enviable." Shadow 7 remarked casually, "Merely a 6th-rank official, yet living more lavishly than our master. Really, watch your words." Pei Yuanjun scolded lightly. "What's this yours and ours? We're all one family. If my father-in-law fares well, then so do I. With no sons in the household, won't all this family fortune be ours someday?" Having said that, he patted my hand contentedly. "Marrying sister-in-law truly is my good fortune." He Kang's gaze finally fell upon me. At first it was a casual glance, but then his pupils abruptly constricted as if he'd seen a ghost, his hands trembling uncontrollably. "Good, my father still remembers me." I immediately curtsied gracefully, speaking softly. "It's been many years since we last met. Is father still in good health?" He Kang stumbled violently, fortunately caught in time by his wife. Though her face had already turned ashen, He Kang's lips trembled uncontrollably, yet he dared not utter a single word, neither daring to acknowledge me, nor daring to claim he didn't recognize me. "It seems he truly fears this lady wife. You call him father?" "Madam," his voice was icy. I didn't answer, meeting her gaze calmly. "Madam," he began examining me carefully, her eyes tracing every inch of my brows and eyes, then suddenly gave a light laugh. Both my daughters took after my looks, but you've inherited your father's features, I suppose. Your mother must have been quite beautiful. Her reaction took me by surprise. According to my original expectations, she should have been hysterical by now, or perhaps clawing at Hikang anything but this calm demeanor. Yes, she was very beautiful. Where is that person now? Dead. I met her gaze squarely, enunciating each word. Buried in the He family ancestral grave. These words finally shattered Madame his composure. She looked at me and murmured softly, buried in the ancestral grave. Madam, let me explain. Hikang grew flustered, reaching nervously for Madame his arm, only to have his hand brushed aside. I'd like some time alone. Husband, please entertain our guests yourself. Lady, he walked calmly toward the door, stumbling slightly at the threshold before disappearing around the corner. Watching her retreating figure, I suddenly felt she looked as pitiful as my own mother. Ah, father-in-law, where are you going? Don't leave now. Someone help my honored father-in-law back inside. We haven't finished discussing our important matters yet. Shadow 7 hooked Hikang's neck like a gust of wind and dragged him back to the stool, shoving him down hard. Ignoring Pei Yuanjun, Hikang glared at me angrily and demanded, "What exactly do you want? What do I want? He's deceived us for so many years. I just want justice. That's all." Father, you said back then that you would come fetch me. Why didn't you come? Do you know how many years your daughter waited for you? Hikang froze momentarily before turning his head coldly. All my daughters are in this household, born of my wife. I don't know you. I lowered my lashes, looking pitifully vulnerable. But Steward Zhong didn't say it that way. At the mention of Steward Zhong, Hikang's expression changed instantly, his eyes involuntarily darting toward Pei Yuanjun. Pei Yuanjun was sharp as a tack and immediately perked up with interest. Eagerly, he urged, "Who is this Steward Zhong? What did he say?" "Sister-in-law, do tell, miss. Let's take this conversation to the back." Hikang had just risen to grab me when Shadow 7's arm dropped heavily, slamming him back into his seat. What words can't be spoken for our master to hear? Our master despises those who speak half-truths most of all. You've piqued his interest, and now you refuse to speak. Seems to me you're courting death. Vulgar. Pei Yuanjun glanced at Shadow 7, sipped his tea, and urged, "Sister-in-law, speak quickly. I'd like to hear what secrets lie between these matters." I raised my eyes to glance at Hikang with a wounded expression, letting out a soft sigh. After father left, those people often beat me. Sometimes the injuries were so severe that I couldn't get out of bed for 10 days or half a month. I tried to escape, but every time I was caught, the beatings only grew worse. Once, I was nearly beaten to death. That old woman feared I might die, so she went to fetch the master. The master told me that the lighthouse father supervised had an accident. On that mid-autumn night, when people gathered beneath the tower to admire the lanterns, it suddenly collapsed, killing many. The emperor was furious and demanded severe punishment for the Ministry of Works, but it was the prince who saved father. In return, knowing the prince's fondness for catamites, father offered me to him. Hikang's face turned as pale as paper in an instant. While Pei Yuanjun seemed lost in memory, his fingers tapping idly against the chair, Shadow 7, fearing Hikang might interrupt, quickly covered his mouth and signaled for me to continue. The master said that only if I stayed there obediently and pleased the prince would my father be allowed to live. I'm my father's daughter, how could I disregard his life or death? Mother always told me father was family. I didn't dare run away again and stayed there quietly. Tears slid down my cheeks as I gently wiped them away. Ever since then, the master often came to see me. He urged me to study hard, gave me silver coins, bought me beautiful clothes, taught me to read and write, and even said he would find me a good marriage. I was very grateful to him and told him that I would repay him someday. The master was already over 50 at that time, a capable steward serving the prince, having handled many shady dealings. On the anniversary of my mother's death, he accompanied me to burn paper offerings in the backyard. Suddenly, he mentioned that he had never thought of marrying in his entire life. He said that for someone like him, when his time comes, he'll have to follow His Highness straight to hell. Having a family would only be a burden. But that very night, as the spirit money burned brighter and the smoke grew thicker, I suddenly felt my limbs grow weak, sapped of all strength. My master abruptly embraced me from behind, his hands frantically groping over my body. "Meng, come with me," he panted in my ear. If you're with me, you won't have to please the prince anymore. He'll never truly want you, he'll just treat you as a gift, passing you from one man to another. None of those men will cherish you either. They've seen too many women, they'll only treat you as a plaything. I'm different, I genuinely like you. I'll marry you, you'll bear me a child, and I'll leave all my family's wealth to you and our son. This world is too harsh on women. Without support, you can only be passed around like an object from one man to another. You're so beautiful, and you work so hard. I truly can't bear to see you go down that path. The master is right. In the prince's mansion, we girls who were raised there were each treated as objects. Our skills in music, chess, calligraphy, painting, martial arts, and beauty were all clearly priced, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder, if a noble preferred charm and grace. The prince would send those skilled in dance. If a noble fancied sophistication, he'd present those versed in poetry and painting. If a noble had peculiar tastes, favoring the untamed, then it would be the turn of those like me who knew some martial arts. Once sent, we were to struggle, to resist, to be beaten half to death by the nobles, letting them fully indulge in the thrill of controlling prey and taming wild horses. During those years, I saw too many girls carried into certain courtyards. Never to return. They thought they'd climbed to higher branches, but in truth, they were just hastily wrapped in tattered mats and thrown into mass graves. Real nobility might seek novelty for a while, but who would bring home a common plaything available to all? After succeeding in his designs, my master became increasingly infatuated with me, and I, within just 2 days, completely accepted reality. I told myself, I refuse to be an object. Why should my fate be controlled by them? I will walk out openly and honorably. So I feigned affection, coaxed him into marrying me, into taking me away from this cage guarded layer upon layer by masters. My master was growing old, a man who'd spent his life decisive in slaughter. Yet in his twilight years, he began clinging to this false warmth. He reveled in the joy I brought him, basking in my complete dependence on him. Men always let their guard down too easily with things they believe they control completely. In his eyes, I was merely a plaything who couldn't survive without him, destined to be wrapped in a tattered mat sooner or later. Thus, he believed he had me completely under his thumb. He desperately wanted a home, craving to taste the bonds he'd never known before life's end. Finally, he went to beg the prince. The prince, acknowledging his years of loyalty, permitted him to retire and take me back to his hometown. We returned to our master's ancestral home. Over the years, he had amassed astonishing wealth, chests of gold ingots silently piled in dark corners, casting a heavy, gleaming light. On our wedding night, he held me with a face creased by smiles. Menga, from now on we'll live peacefully here. No need to bother with those disputes anymore. When he lunged forward, the knife slashed viciously across his back. In the flickering dim candlelight that cast golden reflections throughout the room, I brought the knife down upon him again and again. His struggle faded into surrender within mere moments. He asked hoarsely why. I leaned down and whispered softly in his ear, "You say you like me, yet you can't even remember my name. I'm not Menga. Menga was the girl you forced 3 years ago and eventually threw to the wolves. We once lived in the same house. Sister Menga knew you were coming that night and hid me in the closet early, fearing you'd harm me. Master, these words you're saying to me now, you once said them to Sister Menga too. So, what's all this talk about wanting a home when you're old? It's just empty words to deceive fools like us." What sets Menga apart is her official family background. She carries pride in her bones and refuses to yield. I'm different. From the moment I learned my father had a wife and daughter living comfortably in the capital, I stopped living for myself. As long as I can get revenge, as long as I can survive, what does mere chastity matter? I carefully fed He Kang just the right words to hear. Sure enough, I caught a fleeting glimpse of remorse in his eyes, but it vanished instantly, overshadowed by something he feared even more. With a thud, he dropped to his knees and kowtowed 3 times to Pei Yuanjin. "Your Excellency, please be discerning. That matter was settled by the court years ago. You mustn't take her word for it. The prince has long been stationed beyond the frontier and stays clear of court affairs. You mustn't fall prey to her provocations." Pei Yuanjin seemed to snap out of his thoughts and smiled carelessly. "Father-in-law, what is this? There's no need for such formalities among family." Ying Qi, Help father-in-law up at once. Ying Qi expressionlessly hauled He Kang back to his seat. Pei Yuanjun narrowed his eyes and studied me for a long moment before sighing as he lightly traced the back of my hand with his fan. Sister-in-law is truly pitiable. Though you're also a daughter of the He family, your younger sisters are doted upon while you've suffered so much. TSK. Hearing this makes my heart ache too. The official remarked. Cold sweat dripped from He Kang's temples as he forced a smile and asked, "Then, your excellency's meaning is, this official isn't unreasonable either. After sister-in-law has suffered so much, your father-in-law ought to show some consideration. How about offering 1,000 taels of silver? Fetch the banknotes." He Kang hastily waved his hand. The servant quickly brought forth the silver notes. Pei Yuanjun cast a reluctant glance at them before stuffing them into my sleeve, saying flippantly, "Take it, it's all your hard-earned money." Returning to the courtyard, I handed the silver notes to Lai Wang. "Put them in the pawn shop, it's not safe here." At dinner time, Pei Yuanjun came again. Coincidentally, the barefoot doctor arrived to deliver medicine. Before he could even enter the courtyard, Pei Yuanjun lowered his voice and said, "Get out of here. This widow isn't someone to be trifled with. If you dare deliver that medicine, I'll be collecting your corpse tomorrow." The barefoot doctor fled in a flash. "Sister-in-law, enjoying your meal?" I hummed in acknowledgement. Pei Yuanjun obediently pulled chopsticks from his sleeve and promptly began eating. "By the way, sister-in-law, your first husband was that manager Zhong. What about the second one? How did you end up marrying Minister Zhong afterward?" Speaking of my second late husband, I genuinely intended to build a life with him. He was neither a high-ranking official nor a scholar, just an ordinary commoner. That day I killed my master and ran into the street, feigning madness and shouting wildly. Right there on the main street, I met Feng Yu, a laborer. He was a sincere man. Seeing me behaving like a lunatic, he even abandoned the medicinal herbs he was supposed to deliver to the pharmacy, leaving them by the roadside to take me to report to the authorities. He told the county magistrate that he had personally seen several dark figures scaling my courtyard wall, with his testimony and the coroner's examination revealing deep, bone-exposing knife wounds on my master's body, inflicted with tremendous force. The Yamen concluded it was the work of a robust, martial-trained man in his prime. Seizing the moment, I feigned utter helplessness and produced 50 taels of silver, pleading with the magistrate to apprehend the murderer. The magistrate pocketed the money with eager promises, only to later close the case as bandit robbery, letting the matter fade into obscurity. With my master's death, I gained complete freedom, bought another house, and began living my own quiet life. Feng Yu, fearing gossip around a widow's doorstep, would regularly bring me rice, flour, vegetables, and meat. He refused any extra silver I offered, honest to a fault. Just as my master once said, this world is harsh on women. Men may roam heaven and earth freely, while women remain confined to the inner courtyards, especially for widows. Even stepping outside required covering their faces with veils, lest they invite gossip. I never harbored illusions about changing the world single-handedly. My only wish was to guard what little wealth I had and live peacefully. Through my interactions with Feng Yu, I came to realize he was truly a rare specimen of a good man. Apart from being poor, he had almost no flaws. When he proposed marriage, I agreed without hesitation, but fate is unpredictable. Minister Zhong from the capital suddenly arrived at the local government office to review old case files, and by chance, he came across mine. He summoned me to the county office for questioning, and at our first meeting, he couldn't hide his astonishment at my beauty. Afterwards, he frequently summoned me under the pretext of assisting with investigations. Later, he summoned Feng Yu and subjected him to torture on charges of suspected perjury. Yet even when beaten until his flesh split open, Feng Yu stubbornly insisted he had seen the shadowy figure with his own eyes. Minister Zhong then tried to tempt him. "If you're willing to recant your testimony, I'll grant you a position in the ministry with a monthly salary of 1 tael of silver, freeing you from livelihood worries forever." Feng Yu was stubborn to the core. Once he set his mind on something, not even death could make him change his tune. Minister Zhong had no choice but to throw him out of the Yamen, half dead as he was. On our wedding day, Feng Yu was still bedridden from his severe injuries. Before nightfall, he was gone. As his widow, I arranged his funeral and knelt before his spirit tablet for 3 full days. Actually, Feng Yu wasn't lying, he truly saw a black shadow. It was the black cloth I'd tied outside the wall. When I ran out of the courtyard, I triggered the mechanism I'd set up earlier. Half a month later, Minister Zhong was returning to the capital. He came to see me, condescendingly. "If you're willing, I'll marry you when we return." Of course I was willing. He killed Feng Yu, and this vengeance I must avenge Feng Yu's death. When I first arrived at the minister's residence, Minister Zhong treated me with some respect. But one night, drunk, he barged into my courtyard. I refused, so he beat me mercilessly. I screamed my heart out, and every servant in the mansion heard it. Afterward, I took to my bed and couldn't rise for a full month before I could be helped to stand. Minister Zhong was filled with regret. Once sober, he took my hand and apologized. "You too, seeing me drunk, why didn't you know to yield to me?" Suffering this for nothing, I kept my eyes closed without speaking. After giving the maids a few more instructions to take good care of me, he left. During those days, all the servants in the mansion were enjoying my misfortune. Some said, "A pheasant will always be a pheasant. How could the master ever treat her as a phoenix?" Yes, the master's previous wife was a noble lady from a distinguished family. How dare a widow who lost her husband try to climb the high branch of our minister's residence? TSK, who knows how her husband died? Maybe she killed her poor husband just to get close to our master. Look at the way she walks, swaying her hips and buttocks. Clearly not a decent woman. If she were as proper as you, she'd probably never marry a minister in this lifetime. I lay on the bed, listening to these words with an expressionless face. The girl looks down on me, so naturally she can't be bothered to bring me medicine. She's very perfunctory about it. Either the medicine is cold or leftover from yesterday. In short, after drinking it for half a month, my health still hasn't improved. Minister Zhong is getting anxious again. What's going on? The invitations have already been sent out. How can the wedding proceed like this? The maids hesitated to speak, shifting all the blame onto me. The young lady doesn't take her medicine on time. What can we do about it? Minister Zhong initially intended to reprimand me, but someone happened to arrive summoning him back to his office, so he hurried off. After that, seeing the minister paid no attention, the maids treated me with even greater disdain, sometimes not delivering medicine even once all day. It was at this time that Lai Wang appeared. After finishing his work, he would secretly brew medicine for me, place it by my bedside, wait for me to drink it, and then quietly take the bowl away. I asked him why he was helping me. Lai Wang told me he wasn't actually a servant of the Shangshu's household, but had come with his young mistress when she married into the Shangshu's residence. Minister Zhong is a notorious womanizer who constantly brings women home, and when drunk, he enjoys beating them, often nearly to death. His first wife and several concubines all died from his drunken assaults. My young mistress was frail to begin with. He smashed her head against a pillar, and she died that very night. Lai Wang wanted to seek justice for his young mistress. But how could a lowly servant who'd sold himself into bondage dare accuse a current minister of state? In these times, officials shield each other. The Yamen gates face south, but without silver. Don't bother entering even with justice on your side. If he truly went to beat the grievance drum, his petition likely wouldn't reach the magistrate's desk. He'd first be charged with false accusation, beaten half to death, and sold off. Ordinary folk without power or influence have nowhere to voice their grievances. During my days of recovery, Lai Wang often secretly brought me medicine. Though I had long since recovered, I still pretended to be bedridden. Minister Zhong did not delay the wedding because of my illness. He had grown too impatient. On the wedding night, he stumbled drunkenly into the bridal chamber, eyes bloodshot, clutching a whip. He dragged me off the bed and ordered me to strip and kneel, but before the whip could strike me, he collapsed. I screamed hysterically. The maids rushed in panic, and Lai Wang seized the chance to take away the incense burner from the room. And so, on my wedding night, I became a widow once more. That old bastard actually had such disgusting tastes. Pei Yuanjin clicked his tongue sympathetically. Sister-in-law is truly pitiful, encountering such terrible people. Thankfully she's tough enough to have outlived them all, otherwise how could she survive? Shadow 7 promptly took out a handkerchief to wipe Pei Yuanjin's teary eyes, then casually wiped his own as well. Madam is truly unfortunate. How fortunate she met our master. Madam need not worry. Our master doesn't strike people, he's a good man. After hearing the story, Pei Yuanjun patted my hand and spoke gently. Sister-in-law, rest assured and stay here. Though this official may not be as wealthy as you, I do have influence. As long as you remain in the Chancellor's residence, safety at least is absolutely guaranteed. Yet that very night, disaster struck. Dozens of black-clad assassins swooped onto the rooftops like night owls. Their figures flickering under the moonlight as screams erupted throughout the Chancellor's residence. I slipped quietly out of the courtyard and hid in the shadows to observe. The assassins clearly divided into two groups, one charging straight toward my quarters, the other rushing toward Pei Yuanjun's courtyard. The mansion guards poured out en masse to grapple with the shadowy figures, but clearly overwhelmed, they quickly lost ground. Several black-clad figures broke through the defenses and stormed into Pei Yuanjun's chamber, engaging Shadow 7 in combat. I quickly sensed something amiss. Shadow 7's fighting style was bizarrely defensive, refusing to counterattack. Within a few moves, his sword was knocked away. As Pei Yuanjun was about to be captured, I drew the flexible sword from my waist and leaped into the fray. The blade danced like a viper's strike. And in the blink of an eye, several advancing shadows had fallen to the ground, but with so many opponents, I knew prolonged combat was unwise. Grabbing Pei Yuanjun by the collar, I leaped onto the windowsill. Just as I was about to order Shadow 7 to cover our retreat, I turned to see him already collapsed limply on the ground. With skills this pathetic, how did he even become a personal guard? Fortunately, the assassins' targets were clearly the two of us. Seeing our escape, they immediately swarmed after us like angry bees. The capital's alleys crisscrossed endlessly as I swiftly navigated through them with Pei Yuanjun in tow, turning over 100 corners before finally finding a secluded spot. What's wrong with that poker-faced guy? His martial arts are so weak. No, his skills are actually formidable. Then why didn't he draw his sword? He faints at the sight of blood. His martial arts are too formidable. Every time he draws his sword, blood is spilled. And seeing blood makes him faint, so he usually doesn't draw his sword. I gnashed my teeth in frustration. And you keep someone like that around as a mascot? In the darkness, I suddenly turned my head and locked eyes with Pei Yuanjun, his face flushed crimson, his hands fidgeting nervously. Was it my imagination? Or did I actually detect a hint of coyness in his eyes? I've always been sentimental. Even though he's useless, I can't abandon him just because he's useless. That's not the kind of person I am. As he spoke, Pei Yuanjun suddenly grabbed my hand, leaning toward me with noticeable coyness before resting his head on my shoulder. I was so startled my entire body jolted. Sister-in-law looks so delicate, yet who knew you'd be this fierce? When you were carrying me through the air just now, my heart felt like it was flying out too. My eyelid twitched. What do you mean, sister-in-law? I adore you. Do you adore me too? My face darkened completely as I shoved Pei Yuanjun away. My lord, please show some respect. You're frightening me. An ill-omened man who's buried 7 wives. What nonsense are you spouting about affection? But Pei Yuanjun clearly thought differently. Holding my hand bashfully, he said, Sister-in-law, don't look down on me. Though I've married many times, none were registered at the Yamen. By that count, this would actually be my first marriage. I couldn't be bothered to waste words on Pei Yuanjun. Seizing the right moment, I grabbed him and flew to the next location. We barely got any rest that entire night. Dark figures darted wildly through the streets, determined to eliminate the threat permanently. A direct confrontation wasn't an option, so I had no choice but to haul Pei Yuanjun around while flying haphazardly everywhere. Pei Yuanjun, however, was thoroughly enjoying himself, even stretching out his arms mid-flight and declaring he could feel true freedom. What a lunatic! By dawn, the shadowy figures had failed their mission and retreated en masse beyond the city walls. Pei Yuanjun calmly returned home to change into his court robes, winked at me, and headed off to court, still sporting the same deadpan expression he'd worn all night. Lai Wang stayed behind with the Prime Minister's household to clean up the mess, while I returned to my room and slept like the dead. When I woke again, Pei Yuanjun was sitting excitedly at my bedside, studying me inch by inch. Startled, I shrank back and asked defensively, "What are you doing, looking at my sister-in-law?" Only today did I realize how perfectly sister-in-law suits my taste. To be honest with you, sister-in-law, my heart kept pounding wildly during court today. Pounding is normal. No, it doesn't usually pound like this. Today when I saw the spot where Minister Zhong used to stand in court, it beat even faster. I'm truly grateful to him for dying so early. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't have had this chance to be together. Thanks to my morally upright first 3 brothers-in-law, I couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense, so I changed the subject. Didn't you investigate yesterday's assassination attempt? At the mention of assassins, Pei Yuanjun effortlessly settled back into his chair and said leisurely, those assassins were fierce fighters, skilled with broadswords, clearly not from the capital. If I'm not mistaken, your father has already relayed the message to Prince Chengyang, fearing his past deeds might come to light. The prince is now trying to silence both of us. What does my lord intend to do? Pei Yuanjun looked at me with a smile. Sister-in-law deliberately revealed this matter to me in front of father-in-law precisely to drag me into this, isn't it? Since that's the case, why not speak plainly? What do you want me to do? Don't be fooled by Pei Yuanjun's carefree demeanor. Anyone who could become Grand Secretary at such a young age was already a crafty old fox, so I never planned to hide anything from him. Being seen through by him didn't faze me in the slightest. I am where I am today because of He Kang. Naturally, I want revenge, but I also know that aside from Madam his powerful family background, He Kang and Prince Chengyang are tied together like grasshoppers on a single rope. On my own, I cannot defeat them. Pei Yuanjun raised an eyebrow. Sister-in-law, how do you know I would help you? That is Prince Chengyang we're talking about, the full-blooded brother of the late emperor, the current emperor's uncle, second only to one man and above 10,000 others. Truth be told, I had met Pei Yuanjun long ago, many years ago. Pei Yuanjun once visited the prince's residence. To express his utmost hospitality, the prince specially arranged for the most outstanding maiden among us to attend to him. The maiden possessed peerless beauty, her dancing as graceful as startled swans, and she excelled in every refined art from zither to chess, calligraphy to painting. Such a rare beauty would be impossible for any ordinary man to refuse, yet Pei Yuanjun flatly refused. The guard behind him promptly peeled off the girl who had already coiled around Pei Yuanjun like a serpent, declaring righteously, "What nonsense! Who in this world doesn't know our master only fancies widows?" The prince's expression darkened, yet he went to great lengths to find a beautiful widow. Rumor had it the widow's husband had been freshly killed that very night. What kind of lowly creature dares to climb into our master's bed? Has your highness not heard? Every widow who catches our master's eye is both stunningly beautiful and fabulously wealthy. The prince's face darkened completely. With a grim expression, he asked Pei Yuanjun what kind of twisted preference this was. Pei Yuanjun glanced around before whispering, "Your highness must understand, it's only because the court forbids outright plundering. As an imperial official, how could I possibly make ends meet on that meager salary alone? Robbery might bring quick gains, but it would ultimately tarnish my official reputation. Marrying a widow is different. It earns me praise for being devoted while securing a substantial fortune. That's far better than robbery." The prince actually didn't get angry after hearing this, but burst into laughter instead, repeatedly praising Pei Yuanjun as a clever little fox. After Pei Yuanjun safely returned to the capital, he proceeded to marry 2 more widows in succession, which made the prince somewhat restless. I once overheard my master saying to the prince, "I wonder if Chancellor Pei is doing this on purpose." The widows he marries were all newlywed wives of officials under your highness's command. Several have died within a year, yet no issues were found in the investigations. This man is no simple character. The prince narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly. He's just a civil official. What storm can he possibly stir? Since none of the deceased were high-ranking officials anyway, let him have his fun for now. Later, Pei Yuanjun lived up to the prince's expectations and expanded his endeavors even further. The 7th wife's husband was merely a second-rank official, but by my turn, my husband had risen directly to the first rank. I poured a cup of tea and spoke calmly. "I know your excellency didn't do all this for personal gain. If all that silver had truly gone to the prime minister's residence, it wouldn't be in such disrepair. I suspect those funds all ended up in the national treasury." Pei Yuanjun raised an eyebrow slightly, settling into a more comfortable posture as he gestured for me to continue. "The Prince of Chengyang harbors wolfish ambitions. Though his wings have grown strong, he is not entirely invincible. At the very least, His sheltering of He Kang proves his involvement in the lighthouse affair. The current emperor is young, and the late emperor passed suddenly. Though these years have been difficult, His Majesty has gradually consolidated his foundation. I believe my lord must have played no small part in this. Since you also wish to eliminate Prince Chengyang, why not join forces with me? You'd help me achieve vengeance while assisting His Majesty in removing a thorn from his side. Upon hearing this, Pei Yuanjin's face resumed its usual careless expression. My sister-in-law does have some savings, but that modest sum could at best make life more comfortable. It wouldn't be much help for grand endeavors. Moreover, this matter carries tremendous risk. The slightest misstep wouldn't just endanger my life, it might even implicate His Majesty himself. Do you remember my first deceased husband? I interrupted softly. Pei Yuanjin froze momentarily before a sharp glint suddenly flashed through his eyes. In just a few short days, the long-dormant lighthouse case once again stirred up massive waves throughout the capital. Rumors circulated that the official overseeing the construction had actually been ordered to secretly reduce materials and embezzle funds. As a result, on the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, the lighthouse collapsed under the strain, killing hundreds beneath its light and igniting public outrage. To quell the anger, the late emperor not only granted each bereaved family 100 taels of silver in compensation, but also executed all officials involved in the matter. Yet now whispers emerge that the commoners actually received no more than 10 taels, and those officials sent to the execution grounds were merely scapegoats. Behind the scenes manipulating all this was none other than Prince Chengyang, stationed far beyond the frontier. Prince Chengyang was the late emperor's full-blooded younger brother, having distinguished himself on battlefields since youth with outstanding military achievements, earning him considerable prestige in court. Yet this man was bloodthirsty by nature, stopping at nothing to achieve his ends, and had long been regarded by the late emperor as a grave threat. To prevent him from causing chaos upon returning to the capital, the late emperor issued a special decree during his fatal illness, commanding the prince to remain permanently beyond the frontier and never enter the capital. Yet rumors circulated that since the late emperor's passing, Prince Chengyang had secretly returned to Jiangnan, indulging in debauchery and gathering factions, effectively establishing himself as a regional overlord.
His path, nor mine. For a woman, the most important thing in life is learning to cherish herself. Your mother left early, so no one taught you these things. Consider this my parting gift, take care. Lady, he turned and walked away, her retreating figure unburdened and free, clutching that heavy pouch of silver. My heart ached even as relief washed over me, until finally tears mingled with laughter. When the Prince of Chengyang rebelled, He Kang was driven from his home by his wife. That extraordinary woman sold their mansion at a pittance that very day, then rode south with her 2 daughters to seek refuge with her maiden family. Pei Yuanjin hadn't returned home for days, preoccupied with dealing with Prince Chengyang's rebellion. Lai Wang and I carefully counted all our assets. And as we looked at the stacks of banknotes, I couldn't help but feel emotional. It's truly wonderful to have money. Another month passed, and Prince Chengyang was slain upon his bed during his rebellion by a determined individual disguised as a man. The rebellion collapsed overnight. All officials under Prince Chengyang's command were captured by Pei Yuanjin and brought back to the capital, where they would soon be executed, among them He Kang, who had fled the capital after being abandoned by his wife. You've worked hard, sister-in-law. I've already reported your deed of slaying the rebels to His Majesty. He was overjoyed and insists on rewarding you. The imperial decree will arrive shortly. I glanced at Lai Wang, who quickly fetched 2 small chests and opened them fully on the table. At the sight of stacks of silver notes, Pei Yuanjin's eyes instantly lit up. This is the inheritance left by Steward Zhong and Minister Zhong. I've already converted all the gold and silver into banknotes. Take this money, my lord, to replenish the national treasury. Pei Yuanjin beamed with joy. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. This silver was all obtained through corruption. His Majesty has been concerned about it for some time. I was afraid sister-in-law might be reluctant to part with it and didn't dare bring it up. But rest assured, sister-in-law, I genuinely wish to marry you. Even if we hand over this silver, my monthly salary would be enough to support both of us. After hearing this, I smiled and said, over these years, I've used this silver to open some shops and earned profits. I'm only returning the principal, the profits remain mine. Pei Yuanjin listened with growing delight, grinning foolishly. Of course, of course. Sister-in-law is truly virtuous, knowing I'm incorruptible and even thinking to supplement our household expenses. Shadow 7 deftly pulled out a handkerchief, wiped Pei Yuanjin's eyes, then his own, and sighed emotionally. How benevolent our mistress is. Realizing their misunderstanding, I quickly waved my hands. Sir, that's not what I meant. The silver I earn is for building a house back in the village. You'll still have to support yourselves. The room fell into an eerie silence. Pei Yuanjin looked at me with shock-filled eyes, his voice trembling. Why, does sister-in-law despise me, for having married 7 wives? He turned to Shadow 7, he can testify. Those women all perished shortly after entering the manor. My relationship with them was completely innocent. Shadow 7 immediately stepped forward and said solemnly, that's indeed the case. Most of those women came from corrupt families, after their husbands' households were dealt with by His Majesty. They went to great lengths to cling to our Lord. Despite their endless flattery, our Lord has always valued his reputation as dearly as life itself and never allowed them to succeed in the slightest. How did they die? Pei Yuanjin rubbed his nose, his tone slightly helpless. Their corruption was excessive and angered His Majesty. By law, their entire clans should have been exterminated, but some of their relatives still held official positions. Killing them all would have left the court severely understaffed, so I took them as wives instead, confiscated their family assets, and arranged for them to die of illness. That's where the matter ended. I understand the principle that water too clear breeds no fish, even if corruption runs rampant in the imperial court. His Majesty cannot possibly eradicate every last offender, for a family. Sacrificing just one daughter in exchange for the entire clan's safety and prosperity is nothing short of a bargain, just as my father handed me over to Prince Chengyang without hesitation. Securing his own wealth and security for years to come, you, esteemed as the Prime Minister, concern yourself with court affairs. Naturally, considering the sacrifice of a few insignificant women inconsequential, I raised my eyes to meet his gaze and said word by word, unfortunately, I happen to be one of those insignificant women. I understand your grand aspirations, my lord, but I cannot accept them willingly. The capital was never meant to be my home. I've surrendered all my silver. And if you insist on prosecuting me for my husband's death, I am prepared to pay with my life. If your excellency understands that those I killed deserved their fate, I beg you to show mercy and allow me to leave the capital. 22. 3 days later, the imperial decree granting rewards arrived at the chancellor's residence. The matter of the killings was not pursued by His Majesty, for the minister was already on the list of those who deserved death. Had I not acted, he wouldn't have lived much longer anyway. As for my master, he was always a man of Prince Chengyang, someone His Majesty loathed to the bone, wishing to drink his blood and feast on his flesh. Learning that he died by my hand, the emperor deemed me a heroine among women, rewarding me with 100 taels of gold and permitting my return home. On the day I left the capital, Pei Yuanjin came to see me off with Shadow 7. He patted Lai Wang's shoulder and sighed repeatedly. Take good care of sister-in-law, don't covet her gold. Though she's leaving, I'll still visit her. If you misbehave, I'll chop you up to feed the dogs. Lai Wang chuckled and said, this servant understands. After giving instructions to Lai Wang, Pei Yuanjin finally came to speak with me. He seemed somewhat embarrassed, with a trace of reluctance lingering in his eyes. To be honest, before meeting you, I'd never considered marriage. First, the court was unstable, and I didn't have time for romance. Second, I hadn't met any girl I truly liked. At first, I didn't have any thoughts about you either, but the way you swung your sword that day was so striking, it stayed vividly in my mind for days. And that day when you saved me, it was actually my first time being protected by a girl. Really, you make me feel incredibly safe. I chuckled along. Are you sure this is affection, my lord? If this isn't affection, then what is? If even this doesn't count, then what could possibly qualify? I stepped into the sedan chair and lifted the curtain. My lord should return now. I must depart. I hope you'll become a good official and bring prosperity to the people in the days to come. The wheels rolled as the carriage slowly made its way toward the city gate. Pei Yuanjin's voice came from behind. What does she mean? Is she questioning this official? She might think your excellency isn't worthy of her. What? Pei Yuanjin bristled with indignation. Not worthy? How am I not worthy? I'm worthy enough for 800 round trips with her, with day tours. You say I'm not good enough for her. Damn right I'm not good enough. I'll be the death of her. I couldn't take it anymore. Gripping my knife, I flung aside the curtain and glared fiercely in their direction. Pei Yuanjin waved cheerfully, bouncing up and down. Take care, sister-in-law. I'll visit when I'm free. Don't marry anyone. Wait for me. Extra chapter. 3 years later. I opened over a dozen shops in Yangju. Not only did I earn piles of silver, but life flourished vibrantly. Madam Proprietor, Chief Minister Pei has come again. Just then, 2 white ponies halted like whirlwinds before the shop, and Pei Yuanzhen descended gracefully in his crimson robes, just as striking as our first meeting. What's with the festive attire? It's not like someone died. Pei Yuanzhen rolled his eyes so hard his fan nearly flipped. What nonsense are you spouting, Su Miao Miao? Your father's here to get married, not attend a funeral. For 3 years, Pei Yuanzhen had made monthly trips to Yangju, smoothing things over with officials for me, chasing away my suitors, keeping Lai Wang in check. In short, he did everything that was his responsibility and everything that wasn't. Most importantly, he's no longer keen on marrying widows now. It's said that later, His Majesty tried the same old trick again, hoping he'd marry 2 more widows, but was sternly refused by Pei Yuanzhen. He declared that his heart now belonged to someone else, and there was no way he'd ever marry widows for the emperor again in this lifetime. Left with no choice, His Majesty had to marry them himself in the end. He coiled around me like a snake, arms and legs entwined, sucking fiercely at my neck twice. Meow meow, you know what, I've been ruthless all my life, but only towards you have I ever felt lust. Won't you really consider marrying me? Laughing, I pushed him away. I've heard that ever since your excellency stopped marrying widows, noble ladies throughout the capital have been hoping to wed you. Why don't you consider them instead? Pei Yuanzhen rested his chin thoughtfully for a moment before saying with utmost seriousness, look, since someone's trying to snatch me, that proves I'm quite a catch. You'd better think it over quickly and give me an answer by tonight. I'm not getting any younger. You know, my parents down below are still waiting to hold their grandchild. The end.